Catches up, so is Mulvey here. Dalglish, no, Johnston, yes!
This is the stuff that dreams are made of. A young boy playing on a dusty pitch in Australia sets his heart on making it to Wembley. That boy was Craig Johnston, who went on to score one of the winning goals for Liverpool in the 1986 FA Cup final. A teammate said to him later, "This is as good as it gets." Sure enough, 2 years later, in a move which stunned fans and players alike, Craig Johnston walked out on his contract and went back home to Australia. People have wondered what became of him. The answer is that he spent the last 5 years developing a new kind of soccer boot. This is the story of Craig's boot.
Like, it's been a long while since we've been here, mate. How many years is it?
When he left Liverpool, Johnston went back to join his family on the shores of Lake Macquarie in Australia. This is where he'd grown up. Every morning his dad would drop him off at school an hour early so he could practice kicking a tennis ball against the wall. Get to know the ball, his father would tell him. Make it talk to you. Colin Johnston had been a bit of a player himself. Keen to see his son make the grade, he set an exacting, if rather old-fashioned, training regime.
Yeah, Dad used to wake me up with a plate of steak, eggs, chips, beans, tomatoes, mushrooms. He can say, "You'll never be a footballer unless you eat that." Imagine how good I could have been. You probably ruined my career.
I wouldn't say that. You did all right, my old son. The food couldn't have been that bad.
When Craig arrived back in Australia, he had time on his hands to try other things. The new soccer boot idea was actually triggered by a series of chance events, the first of which was an offer of money.
A company came to me and said they wanted to do a Craig Johnston boot, and they showed it to me. And it was a beautiful shoe. It was made of the softest kangaroo leather, which I wasn't terribly happy about, but it was really, really expensive because it was almost an elitist shoe, and I said no, actually, because I wanted a boot that was affordable for kids. Good boy, well done. Okay, strike it.
At the time, Craig was doing quite a bit of coaching with kids. This is the Lake Macquarie junior team that he used to play for. He realised just how hard and frustrating it was for beginners to control the ball. And it struck him that the conventional soccer boot really wasn't helping.
If you look at the shape of a shoe, it's shaped, when your foot's in it, it's shaped like that. That's the opposite of that, okay? Look at the contact area there. There's hardly any. You did it again. You did this side of the ball with that side of your sweet spot.
Craig taught kids that the secret to accuracy was the sweet spot.
Wet your finger, up in the air, sweet spot. Good boy, hey!
Only when this sweet spot is lined up with the dead centre of the ball will the shot go straight.
Right, mate, match them up, right through that ball. Good kid, excellent shot, give him a clap.
Craig decided that not only was the boot the wrong shape, it was also made of the wrong material.
Leather's a wonderfully comfortable material, but I feel that there must be a better substance than leather to get friction between the boot and the ball, especially when it's wet. And I just thought, well, rather than having a leather glove on your foot, right, what if you could have an instrument that was specifically designed to be a performance tool for getting the ball from A to B in terms of swerve, dip, bend, velocity, accuracy? Because that's all a shoe should be, right? And this revelation that, hey, this is science, was a wonderful awakening. Yay. Good.
Craig had a vision of a revolutionary new boot for kids and adults alike. It would have a larger, flatter sweet spot for better accuracy and be made of something other than leather to give better grip. Other people had toyed with fixing high-friction surfaces onto soccer boots. One of them was a fellow Australian called Harold Hunter.
I experimented with a few things and never really found the right material until one day when I was at work. They were putting a new conveyor belt on a production line, and it happened to be serrated plastic type belt. I thought, well, that looks like what I'm after. So I grabbed a bit, and sure enough, it did the job. So I got in touch with Craig, he being the highest profile person I could think of in football, and got him to try it out for me.
For Craig, the call from Harold Hunter came just at the right moment. He knew he wanted to get the soccer boot to perform better, but didn't really know how to achieve it.
Don't know how they'll be for size. They should be fairly close.
Players need grip to spin the ball, which makes it swerve in the air. If they get it right, they can produce impressive banana-shaped shots that bend round the opposition into the net.
Whoa, that's nice.
How's it feel?
Grips the ball more.
Certainly get some bite off the ground. When it hits the ground, it really jumps up.
Harold's boots certainly seem to produce enough spin, but players also want to feel the ball with their feet. In this regard, there was a problem.
It felt far too thick and cumbersome and bulky, and the ball was miles away from your actual foot, which is the opposite thinking of a soccer boot. But it was a different feeling, and you could definitely feel that the ball was doing strange things in the air.
The good swerve suggested that soccer boots could be made of things other than leather. But if not chunks of conveyor belt plastic, then what?
Where's the wind when you need it?
An idea came to Craig while windsurfing. Along with the rented sailboard, Craig had borrowed a pair of boots, purpose-made to keep a grip on the board in the water. Whether it was the boots or not, his windsurfing seemed to improve. As he glided through the shark-infested waters of Sydney Harbour, he found the grip that the boots gave was particularly reassuring. And good grip in the wet was just what he was after for his new football boot. Craig set off to find out more about these windsurfing shoes. The trail led to the local sports shop.
How you doing?
Good, mate. Yourself?
Good, thanks.
Could you help me with a little bit of information?
There he learned that some shoes were simple one-piece mouldings. Others combined different materials. One of the specialists in this type of manufacture was a French company called Q.E.D. Now, it just so happened that Craig was going to Europe for the 1990 World Cup, and he decided to take a small detour to see them. Since he spoke little French, and keeping in the international spirit of things, he engaged the help of an American-born Egyptian woman, Hoda Abdul Hamid.
I was actually helping out a friend. She was producing a football show for the World Cup. And she just asked me urgently to come in and translate for her. And the person to translate for was Craig.
Hoda was the absolute help, because she was driver, she was interpreter, she was making sure I wasn't getting ripped off financially by different people. And also she knew nothing about soccer at all, which was good, you know, because she could look at it from a different viewpoint. Okay. Merci beaucoup.
They tracked down the Q.E.D. company to a small industrial estate on the outskirts of Paris. Craig arranged to come and discuss his football boot project with the firm's director, Mr. Roger Ors. From this factory, they produced specialised sports shoes for markets around the world. Craig had already seen their windsurfing shoes in Australia. They also manufactured such things as golf shoes and ice skating boots. These were all made by a process called injection moulding.
As you will see, thermoplastic rubber.
Okay.
It's inside.
Yeah.
It's swallowed by the machine.
Thermoplastic rubber is a mixture of synthetic rubber and plastic which melts when hot. It is injected under great pressure into a series of rotating moulds where it cools and solidifies in seconds to produce the finished article.
Every 27 seconds you have one foot.
Right.
No, you slip the upper around the last.
Right.
And then, as you will see, the injection is coming. In 3 seconds, it's filling the mold.
Yeah.
Craig did some quick mental arithmetic. On one of these machines, he could turn out 1,000 football boots a day at a very modest price. The product that came closest to what he wanted was the golf shoe. The rubber was injected over a thin leather sleeve, which gave comfort.
What struck me about them was the simplicity of structure and the combination of materials and rubbers, and I thought it quite fascinating, having been used to leather shoes that are glued and stitched and created around a last. It just seemed like a magic way of making shoes.
Okay, Craig, vous connaissez Monsieur Malik? You know Mr. Malik?
Craig commissioned Okispor to make a prototype soccer boot. It would use the same thermoplastic rubber as the windsurfing shoe to give grip in the wet, and Craig wanted a flattened top to give a larger area of contact with the ball.
Well, in particular, you know how the shape of a soccer shoe across the toes like this?
Yeah.
What I'd like a little bit more is to have this shape. So we increase
a kind of curve.
A curve, so this captures the ball. Rather than going away from the shape of the ball, it captures the ball.
Yes.
The new mould would be made by Okispor's resident shoe designer, Mr. Malik.
Mr. Malik was an old Yugoslavian cobbler who'd been doing this for years, and he knew a lot about comfort, which was good, because he'd handmade soccer boots for a famous player called Kappa. Again, he thought I was quite strange when I came in, asking for this odd shape of boot.
They agreed to modify one of their golf shoe moulds to make Craig's new football boot. This would cost him around £15,000 and take a month or so to do. A few weeks later, he got a call to say that the new mould was ready.
They got the mould back and said that they were very happy with it, but the problem was they had to shut down the factory, more or less, their production run, to get my one mould up. But Mr. Ors was very good, and when the big day finally arrived, we got there, and it was almost like expecting a child, you know, what's going to come out of the mould.
Hop.
Wow, look at that. It's a real shoe.
So there it was, an injection moulded football boot. But did it work? Craig needed somewhere to test the boot, preferably with a strong wall that he could kick a ball against. Hoda found a place, at the tennis club next to the Paris Saint-Germain football team's training ground.
Saint-Germain-en-Laye is already a very elegant, trendy neighborhood. And it was quite a shock for the members to see that their wall was occupied by some long-haired guy who was kicking balls and changing shoes every 5 minutes.
They were grudgingly allowed onto the tennis practice wall. The mat was for the studs on the all-weather surface.
Oh, well, instantly it felt very, very different from a leather soccer shoe. The shape kept the ball pretty much on line, and the ball did something that I've never seen a ball do. The way it held its shape and just sort of moved through the air, even if I hit it wrong. A bit more extra strength.
But when Craig tried to put spin on the ball, he didn't find the extra grip in the rubber he'd been hoping for.
The grip wasn't instantly there and was a disappointment, which was the main thing I was looking for. But this other theory of the solidness hitting the ball was definitely there.
That evening in his hotel, Craig pondered on how to get his new rubber boot to grip the ball better.
I thought about tyres on a car, the fact that they've got grooves so that they purchase into the bitumen when you put the brakes on, or the acceleration. So what I needed was some purchase and grip. So I got a small motor, an engraver's tool, and just started to etch the various tyre marks in the shoe. One of the first ones I finished up with was very, very rough, and it took a long, long time to do. But that's why I was here. I was obsessed by the whole thing, I must admit now. So on, zoom.
The following morning, Craig and Hoda went back to the tennis club to try the new tyre tread pattern.
Okay.
Wait. Okay.
They decided to videotape all the tests. The result was unexpected. They had improved the grip, but at the expense of the power and control of the shot.
It seemed to to get more of a purchase, but lethargic. I don't know what the word is. It just seemed slower off the foot than with the complete one. It seemed to be faster off the foot, but not as much grip. So.
But Craig didn't give up. He got more boots from the factory and continued to look for the magic formula.
Craig would sit and carve every night. And when I used to sit there and say, but this is similar to this, why are you doing it? He said, no, this is 1 millimeter higher, this can change the swerve, this can change the grip. You know, he wanted to try all the options to be sure he wasn't missing anything.
Then Craig found the answer. He had pared the rubber right down in places to leave a series of protruding fins.
I actually felt that what was happening was that the spacers were as important as the grip, and in fact I was getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 contacts on the ball rather than just one big one that was gripping and slowing the ball down.
The fins certainly seemed to produce more spin on the ball, and the thinner rubber absorbed less energy, but Craig thought he could still do better.
I wasn't 100% happy with the whole thing. You know, it was an improvement, but I didn't think a stunning revelation as such. And this was after 3 or 4 months, and I started to get a bit tired and homesick, and I wanted to go home. And then I was in the factory one day, and one of the rubber plugs dropped on the ground, and it sort of bounced. So I said, well, that must be the sort of extra energy I'm feeling when I kick the ball. And I was in a kid's shop, and it dawned on me, super balls, right? So if this rubber, which was basically a fairly dead rubber, could bounce, then what would this do? So I bought about a dozen of these things, and I thought, well, the quickest way to test this concept out was to slice up the super ball, which I did here, and I actually stuck it on one of the boots. I think I got there about 7 o'clock in the morning, right, because I was so keen to test this particular one. And immediately I could feel that explosive element that I was looking for.
All Craig had to do was get the same Super Ball properties into the moulded rubber of the boot.
And it seemed that the next stop was a rubber expert, and I found one in the Malaysian Rubber Company.
The Malaysian Rubber Producers Research Association is actually based in England, just outside London. They run a consultancy service for people wanting to find out about the properties of rubber. Here Craig took his Super Ball covered boots to see Dr. Colin Metherell.
The rubber that he was using was one of these high bouncing polybutadiene balls, very high resilience materials. But the problem with this type of material is that it has very poor abrasion and tear strength, and in fact you can tear it with a fingernail quite easily. And we suggested that he used natural rubber.
Natural rubber comes from the plantation in blocks of coagulated latex. They showed Craig how it could be processed to change its properties to give the rebound energy he needed and still be strong enough for a football boot. But there was a snag.
They were supposed to send it to Mr. Orse in the form of something that he could manipulate. And it seemed that what was happening was it needed to be vulcanized before it worked. Now, vulcanized is a baking process under tons and tons of pressure. That is not what Mr. Orse could do.
Vulcanization is a chemical reaction which occurs at high temperature. It can be achieved in more expensive injection moulding machines, but not the ones at Occuspor. Craig had to make a choice.
And I felt the answer was vulcanization. So I went back to Europe, and I got the final boot that I knew worked, but the thermoplastic rubber now had to be turned into a vulcanized rubber, and I wasn't going to spend, you know, 50,000 bucks to get the mold made. So I cut this vamp off, laid it flat, and then I had a flat mold made, which wasn't very expensive, right, and could be vulcanized very easily.
The flat mould incorporated the same fins as before, but now they were made of vulcanized rubber. This was then stitched onto a conventional soccer boot. This was something of a do-or-die attempt to get the perfection he sought. Injection moulding had proved just too expensive to develop further. On another cold winter's day, Craig tried the new boot.
It was just such a beautiful smack and a thud. You could hear the sound of it, and you could feel the ball and look at the ball accelerate. It was like an enlightenment. It's like hallelujah. That's how I felt, because I thought, that's it. Vulcanized rubber is the answer.
Craig edited together his videotapes to show how the extra grip put more swerve on the ball. He asked a young apprentice from the Paris Saint-Germain team to try swerving the ball around a wall of dummy defenders. The red dots are for shots with a leather boot, the white ones for his new vulcanized rubber one. He was also convinced that the new boot gave the shot more power and accuracy.
I said, look, there's something here, but I've had enough anyway, so maybe I've got to take this to someone else.
First he had to make sure his new boots would be legal. Camcorder in hand, he went to FIFA in Zurich, soccer's international rule makers.
Yep, that's Mr. Blatter from FIFA, the General Secretary.
Instead of getting the red card from them, Craig got their positive encouragement.
I'm sure it will improve the game.
By then the project had cost Craig £250,000. He had patented the rubber fin design, but needed help to go any further. He approached Adidas in Germany.
Well, I presented to the innovation department at Adidas in Nuremberg, and some of them were extremely sceptical. In fact, one guy apparently walked out of the room and said, this is nonsense, a rubber boot, this is not possible.
Adidas did agree to have their scientists examine the boot. They used special video equipment to measure the speed of the shot and the degree of spin and swerve of the ball in the air. They compared Craig's boot with one of their conventional leather ones. A few weeks later, Craig was summoned back to hear the results.
Now, I remember my hands were sweating like that. What's he going to say? What's he going to say? And he sort of shook his head and said, well, the one we tested, there was 23% more swerve, about 7% more velocity. The accuracy we couldn't decide, but definitely there's something in it. And I remember the rest of them all stood up and started clapping, you know, and it was just, you know, somebody else says it works apart from me.
Adidas offered Craig a deal whereby he could work with their designers to produce a marketable product. But there was something of a clash of cultures.
I know why you did it. I sat there when we set it together because you wanted to put the hole through there and put the laces through. There was a lot of people in the company that resisted me. I'm Australian, I'm loud, I'm aggressive, I'm bullish, okay, and I'm young. And I was dealing with a lot of very elderly people that had been making football shoes for the finest company in the world since time began. All of a sudden I've come in and said, look, I think you should do it this way. And there was an instant clash, but the product was worth doing.
Initially, they had focused on getting the maximum performance from the boot.
This type of thing off the fin.
The rubber fins and bumps were what had made Craig's prototype work, but Adidas wanted their product to look less like a rubber hedgehog and more like a normal soccer shoe. They whittled down the new rubber sweet spot area, confining the fins to a small section of the toe. Craig initially resisted, but eventually a compromise was reached. They named it the Predator.
We had some real ugly boots before this one, and this is the first one that really performed, but also had a look that was acceptable.
In January '94, Craig was told that Adidas were about to begin production of the Predator at their Nuremberg factory.
Up to now, it's all been prototype stuff and all stuff that wasn't really real, it was one-off. But this morning we'll see how, you know, possibly the first million Predators are going to be made.
Showing Craig round the factory was the Predator project manager, Hart Klaar.
We also produced the world-famous Copa Mundial. And
Hart has been the grandfather of the project, and he's held it together when I've been ready to walk away and other people have been ready to send me away.
Getting this quality out, which we want.
Craig saw how the complex assembly line process was a long way from his original idea of a simple injection moulding. The rubber fins were made as a flat sheet, which was sewn into a series of other components to form the upper of the boot.
Whoa. This is a very important operation.
There was still a lot of best kangaroo leather in the Predator, something of a sore point for Craig.
Does that make the players jump higher?
No, it does not make the players jump higher.
I'm sorry. Right, next.
From there, the assembled upper went on to be formed around a last. They had toyed with some novel types of sole construction, but for the moment decided to stick with the conventional Adidas stud system, which was bonded on.
And it's the molded version of the Predator.
And then, there it was. Craig's boot as a factory-finished product. However, instead of a cheap coaching aid for kids, this was now one of the most expensive boots ever made.
And it really is a stunning look. You know, I mean...
Adidas have decided to pitch the boot at the top end of the market. Competition among brands is intense, and to get a new product like this to take off, it is essential that they get top players to wear it. So on a cold February afternoon, Craig joined the Adidas rep on a visit to Manchester United's indoor training ground. Paul Ince had an agreement to wear Adidas boots and had expressed interest in the new product.
Good luck on the new
It seemed that other players had heard about it too.
This is the new rubber.
Maybe Ince's teammate and England assistant manager Brian Robson had his eye on it to help the national side. But this pair of boots was for Ince. They hoped that he would be the first player to wear the Predator in a match.
If you don't hit it right, you're still going to get the bending, no?
If you can do us a favour though, and just have a look.
To see this boot on the feet of the world's top soccer players is an achievement in itself, a triumph of one man's invention and perseverance. Craig hopes it will help players develop new skills and make the game more interesting. But it's not just at the top end that Craig hopes the boot will eventually have an impact.
I think the important thing about the boot is why it was created. It was designed as a training tool for kids to make them start thinking about what they're doing when they're addressing the ball, because that's the key to being able to play or not. And if that message is hammered home, well, this won't be a one-hit wonder here today like some fad. This will be an important part of the development of kids in the future.
Well done, Nate. Well done, Nate. Go on, sweet spot, son. Sweet spot. Unlucky. Yes, mate. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Football, racing and golf next tonight on BBC One in Sports Night.